Built Better, the podcast for home improvement contractors by Modernize Home Services.
On this episode of Built Better podcast, we're welcoming CEO of Builder Funnel, Spencer Powell, to take a closer look at how Builder Funnel has transcended traditional contractor marketing and entering a new age of digital marketing and why it is so effective. So just to give you an idea, a little background on Builder Funnel. Established in 2010, they're an award-winning inbound marketing agency dedicated to helping home builders, design, build, remodelers, and contractors tackle their biggest marketing challenges. Their team specializes in content management and creation, website development, email marketing, SEO, and lead nurturing. So Spencer, he comes from a long line of builders who's been in business for over 110 years now, dating back to his great-grandfather. Spencer has also written a book, Remodeler Marketing Blueprint, which is designed to be a foundational marketing guide for remodeling and custom building companies. So Spencer, great to have you here on today's episode of Built Better. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, Dom, I'm excited to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't we just dive right in here? We've got limited time as we usually do with these things. So why don't you just give me kind of a little bit of a background and just tell me just what inspired you to start the business?
Yeah, it's, I feel like it started as many things do. I got out of college and didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I just started researching online. And this was kind of around the time that people were going, I wonder if we can use Facebook for business, and that was the crazy idea. And so there were these things called Facebook business pages. And, I just started diving into how social was being used in business. And I picked up a couple friends and family clients, and I just was like, yeah, maybe I can, create a company around this. And so as it turns out, my dad had a direct mail company at the time. He was seeing that was nearing a cliff, and just that industry was, slowly dying, and digital was on the rise. So as I was lifting off my company, he just said, hey, do you want to just come figure out this digital thing over here with me? And then we were working with my uncles at the time who had been running the family operations. And we, over a few years, took them from about 2 million to 10 million in that division. And we just said, hey, I think we can help some other people do this. And so, I feel like I just stumbled into it, but it was just through something that I was really enjoying and loving and, learning about. And then, you just trial and error, you just take one step forward and keep going.
Yeah, so much of my life has been just failing forward, as Chris and I talk about all the time on our little chats here. But why don't we dig in a little bit more to that? Because digital marketing is pretty broad. When you say digital marketing, there's a lot of different avenues, right? I remember when I started off in the industry about 10 years ago, most people were still using the Yellow Pages, Yellow Book, to get to get their leads, right? So kind of just tell me a little bit more about why it's important for contractors that might have had that experience. They might still work mainland referrals, things like that. Why is it important for them to embrace the digital side?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think it goes back to this larger shift that we've seen in just buying behavior. So you look at why those old channels worked. TV, radio, billboards. Yellow Pages, those types of things, print. It's because that's what everybody was looking at and looking to. And over a period of years, people just kept going online and looking for information, and then they're finding companies that way. And so if you ignore that channel, then you kept missing out on more and more of your target audience, and now we obviously see a lot of those channels as dead or dying, or they just play a very small role, even if they didn't totally die. And so, does advertising still work on TV and radio? Sure, but we've gotten really good at blocking those out, right? I pay Spotify so I don't have to listen to ads. That's literally why I pay them money, so I don't have to do that. We have YouTube TV and all this kind of stuff where we can fast forward through commercials or just dodge them all together. And so I think that's really what we saw, is just this macro shift in the way people research and find companies and shop and buy. People still look to referrals, but more and more they trust the internet more than their friends. And it's been a slow build to get there. But that's why it's such a critical channel today. Is I was just thinking about think about the last 5 things you bought. How did you go through that buying process? And you probably were on the internet for all 5 of them.
I want to follow up with that. What would you say to a company, Spencer, that's like, yeah, I get it. More people are using the internet, but I get plenty of business from all that dinosaur stuff. What would you say to them?
That's a good question. And I have this rule that I've tried to follow. Being in marketing and being a digital marketing agency, obviously we're biased to that channel and, promoting it. We also do it for ourselves and believe in it. I'll never tell somebody to stop doing something that's working. If something is working for you, keep doing it. But there's a couple of other things to kind of build on that question. One is, will this thing continue to work? And that's an unknown, right? Like direct mail worked fantastically. And then that industry kind of, declined, TV ads, those types of things. You look at the performance you're getting. So I would just say, make sure you're measuring those channels that you're doing and they're working for you. And then I like kind of this 80-20 rule. So maybe everything you're doing is working really well. Like that could be 80% of your budget. And then 20% is experimental. Like, hey, I don't know what the next thing is going to be. Yeah, because marketing is always changing, especially in the digital landscape. And so even if you're like, hey, everything's going great, keep doing those things and then put some budget towards digital and get it going. And then you might see, hey, I'm measuring, actually, that's a better ROI. I'm going to drop more budget here and shift it over to digital. And you can make kind of a slow transition. So that's how I would answer that question. I won't ever tell somebody to stop doing something that's working for you. If it's a channel that produces leads, you like the cost per lead, you like the ROI on that, keep doing it. I might even ask you, why don't you just double that channel if it's working so well?
I think that's almost exactly the way we approach it as well. It's like, hey, if you have something working, spend more money there. It's interesting the way you answered it, though, and not that the pandemic is necessarily a representation of all scenarios that we're going to face as builders, but I think it's one that is certainly worthy of mentioning. We didn't see it coming, or at least not everybody saw it coming, right? And without naming names of certain companies, a lot of people were heavily invested in door-to-door canvassing, where there was not any diversity in their portfolio. And we could all guess how canvassing went in the first part of COVID, right? Then you also had companies heavily invested in events. And once again, I'm not suggesting that you don't get invested in events or home shows and whatnot, but those markets dried up so fast, like they were just gone. And that's something that we didn't see coming, right? That's like a source of water that's always there, and then one day it's not. And so I do think your advice in dabbling in other stuff, even if it's a little bit of R&D to A/B test stuff, it is something so critical because we don't know, one, what will work, and we don't know what is working that will stop working randomly one day. So
yeah. Well, and Chris, I like how you packaged it too. It's almost like if you look at all of your marketing channels and you kind of equate it to like an investment portfolio. If you're all in on one channel, like if that channel does well, you might just crush it. But then if that channel falls and you have nothing else, then you're also going to fall just as hard. But if you're diversified, if those two, like canvassing went and events went, but if you had a strong digital presence also, you could have weathered more of that storm. So I think there is some element of just diversity of where your leads are coming from that helps you survive over the long term.
Yeah, I always talk about that as it relates to a stock portfolio. I'm not that great at stocks, but I do know that diverse portfolio is what they say, right? So
that's what they say, right?
But I go back to the Pareto Principle. That's the 80-20 rule. So a lot of contractors are going to find that 80% of their revenue comes from 20% of their sources, right? But if they want to grow, then they're going to start need to branch out. And the flip is then often true, right? So you're going to get that extra 20%, but it's going to take 80% of the effort that you're going to put out there. And a lot of that is just testing, troubleshooting. But then you're going to find a channel that is going to be able to kind of slip back into that 20% effort channel and then drive way more growth. So yeah, I think it always goes back to 80-20 no matter what you do. I mean, that's kind of why it's a pretty established principle that that translates across a lot of industries, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think the great aspect of digital that you touched on a little bit is just the fact that you can measure it so intently. It's also kind of a double-edged sword sometimes, but because you start measuring things and it's like, what do I measure? And then you get paralysis by analysis. But what data can you offer to contractors that are a little bit newer to the digital space to really understand like where the trends are going? Because I think as a leader, you want to have vision and you want to be able to see kind of some of the things that are going to happen in the market, right? What new markets am I going into? But that goes for marketing channels too. So if you have the data at your disposal, why don't we talk a little bit through it?
Yeah, I think I like this question because I think a lot of times, like you said, we like to dive into the data, and then the more data you have, you're like looking at all this data and you're like, how much does email open rates matter? Or how much does, click rate matter on this particular button and those types of things? And you can get that granular, which is really cool. I think what most companies, again, like this is probably the 80-20 answer, right? Most companies just need to put tracking in place so they can track traffic, leads, and customers, and by source. And I think if you do that, that alone is going to make a monster difference. Most people have Google Analytics. Some people have conversion tracking set up, and most people don't actually know if it converts to a customer and where that customer came from. So it's one thing to know, hey, we landed, 100 customers from my website. Okay, but what channel was it? Was it organic search? Was it paid? Was it social media? Was it, these different third-party sites that I'm getting traffic from? And so that's what I always encourage people to do, is just get that base foundation set up, because at the very least, if you run a year's worth of data through that, you can look at the end and go, okay, out of these 100, 500, whatever customers you have, and you can see, gosh, 50% came from this one channel. Okay, can I do more of that? Or how would I accelerate that? Or, hey, this channel, produced 20 customers, but the conversion rate was really high. Like maybe we should be doing more there because it's actually a great channel. We just didn't get enough production out of it. And so that's what I would say, is just nail those basics. And then once you've done that, then you can kind of like, it forces you to drive deeper, because you go, oh, how can I make that channel perform better? Oh, well, I should look at click rates and landing page views and like time on site and all those other like granular metrics. But I almost feel like those don't matter as much unless you have the macro nailed down.
I love that. Start with blocking and tackling. I got to ask you, Spencer, you've been at this for so long. I don't know how much you actually talk to the contractors these days, but I got to imagine you've had plenty of conversations. How many companies don't have that basic layer?
It's got to be almost all of them. I mean, percentage wise, I feel like it's just, if I look at my circle of who I talk to and who I bump into, I would say it's 95%. I mean, maybe even higher. I'm hesitant to say a really high percentage, but that's, my gut is telling me it's probably higher than 95%. Most people are great. I shouldn't even say that. Some people have traffic and leads. They're like, hey, I'm tracking that conversion. But when they track a customer, usually if they're tracking a customer, all they know is it came from the website as a bucket, but they don't know what source from the website, which you're missing so much with just that little nuance there. Because if you know it came from the website, that's helpful. But if you're spending, a few $1,000s on paid, some money on SEO, you're spending money on social, you're spending money with third-party sites, like all that traffic is coming in, that can all be broken down really easily. So yeah, it's a high percentage. So just that alone, like if you just take that step and nothing else from this podcast, like you'll be ahead of your competition pretty much. So
no, I'm going to piggyback that just a little bit, because it's such a sensitive spot we have in our business. And so for any contractor listening, I would say there is so much empathy we have for companies that are expressing less than desirable performance. There's no question about it. I mean, me and Dawn and a number of people in our company, I mean, we're so empathetic to that. We care. Nobody wants to be frustrated. Nobody wants to feel like they're spending money on some avenue and not getting a return. So there's a lot of empathy there. However, and data's not all of it. There's other pieces we need to know as well. But without knowing like some data, even if it's aggregate, which is not ideal, we prefer lead level, but without knowing that, and don't even get me started on the process they put our leads through so that we can make sure there's some standardization there. Like it's very challenging, almost impossible to give any good recommendation. And just so the contractors hear this, it'd be the equivalent of going to a doctor and saying, here's my problem. And without them asking questions and gathering a lot of information, they give you some sort of prescription, which would be malpractice.
Yes.
Right? Like, we need a lot of information. And in a perfect world, and to your point, it doesn't have to be super complex information, but there has to be some level of data as a pillar. And then I would say that you have to marry in a certain set of processes with that so that we can understand, okay, raw unit, we understand how we got it. What's the process that raw unit's being put through to turn it into a customer? And without marrying those two things together, I don't know how any professional out there would provide sound advice.
Yeah. I love that analogy. It's like you walk in, you're like, I hurt. And they're like, okay, here's some medicine. What? That doesn't work. And hopefully people are listening to this and they're not intimidated by some of the like lingo we're using, because it's really just a matter of installing some software, and there's multiple types of that software out there. We happen to use HubSpot, but there's tons of companies that do that. And so once you install the tracking software, now you're rocking and rolling.
Yeah, I always tell folks that I work with that are looking for consulting, they're like, just, can you hold my hand through this? Like, there are literally third parties that all they do is get you set up and make it more of a turnkey solution. When you're at a point of just starting to scale your business, you want to outsource as much as makes sense based on the cost benefit. And most of the time, third parties are going to really help you get established and build that foundation. And then when you want to bring capital costs down, when you want to reduce your cost of marketing and then your OpEx, that's when you start to roll in hiring people to do those types of things that can really specialize and control the quality a little bit more, right? But there are so many great businesses that are building foundations for businesses that I think a lot of people don't want to pull towards because it's a trust thing. Do you see that type of situation often?
Yeah. And I think too, as entrepreneurs, like we have this tendency to like want to do it all ourselves or, wear all the hats. And I think that becomes kind of this badge of honor or, whatever it is, ego, all kinds, it could be all kinds of things. But I think part of it is just kind of in that DNA when you start that business. But I think you make a great point. Like, you can get out of those sticking points a lot faster if you just go to some third parties like, hey, solve this problem. And great. I just shortcutted my learning path, by months or years, and then you can always bring it in-house later. So I think that's great advice.
I was going to say one thing to piggyback that, Dom, is there's nothing wrong when you hire somebody to also hire with the intent to steal some knowledge. I do it all the time. You know what I mean? Like there's plenty of literature in the books that would suggest it's a good leveraging tactic. Is, if you wanted to learn more about inbound marketing, maybe you hire Spencer's company to do a very specific task or 2 or 3 for a certain duration of time. And maybe as an owner or, a CMO, you leverage the fact that you're dealing with an expert and you level up, you steal a lot of knowledge. And it's certainly something that I do a lot with experts as well, because we're never going to be, I'll never know as much about Spencer as inbound marketing. It's just not my area of expertise, but there's a certain layer that I need to know. So I think if you look at your relationships with any of your vendors as an opportunity to just level up your knowledge, I think there's a dual benefit in that as well.
Yeah, totally agree. And we have some people that come to us and just say, this is my goal. I want to work with you for a year. And then we want to bring it in-house. It's like, all right, great. Let's do it.
Yeah, Chris, you knowledge thief, you.
He's playing chess over there. We're all playing checkers. Yeah.
He really is. That's why Chris is who he is, I did have a question though. Typically, not every source is built the same, right? You're going to have, like we just talked about, the 80-20 rule, but within that, there's going to be a lot of different sources that get you to different places. But making up the entire portfolio, I think the customers I see, contractors I see doing it really the best is they learn to measure the source for what it is, essentially. If I was to apply a closing rate or a sit rate from a referral lead to my digital marketing, I would probably like never use digital marketing ever because I'm just looking at it unrealistically. And I see that that's a very common thing that I see. Is that something that you see that you have comments on?
Yeah. Love that you brought that up. I feel like a common scenario is they come to us and they're like, hey, I'm doing, 3 million in sales. I'm a design build remodeler or something like that. And we talk about, okay, what have you done for marketing? What are you doing for marketing? Like, we're all word of mouth referral. And so the perception is, anything I spend on marketing will like probably double my business because I've done no marketing and I've gotten to 3 million. So they think $500 or $5,000 is going to suddenly blow up their business because suddenly they're doing marketing. And so obviously we all know that isn't the way it works. But you make a great point. Just even if you look at different channels, within digital, you might look at social as more of a brand play than a lead gen play. And you're like, hey, we're going to invest dollars here because we know somebody's going to find us on Google or paid. Then they're going to go check us out on social to like test credibility. And so you're investing in that part of the whole marketing experience. And so, some people might say, hey, organic, like best quality, lowest cost per lead, highest conversion rates. But man, I'm like hitting a wall. So I'm going to do paid to support that or accelerate that. And the cost per lead is going to be higher, but you're okay with that because you're trying to generate more leads. And so I think those are a couple of examples that kind of point out what you just said. But yeah, the most common is just they've spent hardly anything on marketing. So they think if they make a jump, and even in for like 20 grand for a year, they just feel like it's going to be like waving a magic wand or something. I wish it were that way.
I mean, there's always a barrier to entry for any channel, but there's also a minimum investment that you have to make as well, right? So the stock portfolio thing in marketing is a great metaphor because it translates in so many different ways. Like, I'm not going to buy one share of Tesla and think that that's going to make me money. Right. You're going to have to make a significant investment. Then you're going to have to watch that over time. Right. So there's an investment and then there's a time scale thing. And then you bring up a great point too. It's like there's some companies that will fund parts of their business at a loss because they know that it's going to help other parts of their business that are more profitable, that have better margins on it. Right. And it's going to help them corner market share or, the concept of the loss leading is pretty ubiquitous in the business world, right? And so talk to me a little bit more about, kind of how you see that and how that's a part of your marketing strategy, maybe your SEO strategy that you work with your customers.
Yeah. Just to clarify the question, you're saying, how do we use that as a part of like conversion rate or reframe it. I want to make sure I'm answering it right.
No, that's fine. So basically what I kind of want to know is how do you, in the broad scheme of your SEO strategy, are there areas where you would say, hey, listen, we've got to over-index to this, maybe at a loss, or expand our marketing cost targets on this, our ROI targets on this, and this we have to keep lower because the portfolio needs to, make an ROI, right?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I feel like it's always goal dependent, but I would say generally like a common scenario is someone comes to us, their website just hasn't been performing. It's not a producing channel for them in general. So we talk about improving SEO and just building up organic search so they can drive some leads there. Typically for us, like social is going to be like minimum viable, product there. Like, what do we need to do on social to be a trust verifier, to participate, be meaningful, display professionalism? Then we're going to sync everything into this SEO channel so we can drive that up. And then to the other part of it is like, hey, you're going to have to do this. You're going to have to keep putting inputs in probably for 6 to 12 months. And then you'll start to see that cumulative effect. So to go back to the investment portfolio, it's like putting in, and you do see progress, but it just feels like it's going really slow and not fast enough. But then when you get to that size, it starts to compound in a more meaningful way. So I feel like the conversation for us is a lot around that time delay and staying the course. And for people that want to go faster, we always say, great, like let's add a paid component, because there's just some element of not being able to make this SEO channel go faster. Like we could do a lot there, but if you really want some quick wins, like let's support it with, like Google Ads or something like that.
How much of what you guys do, Spencer, starts to deviate and go more into once we generate a lead, whatever channel it may be coming from, like how much of your rhetoric goes into what they should be doing with the lead that they're actually capturing, essentially kind of the process, their factory for working it. Do you have advice that goes into that realm?
Yeah, we typically don't provide a lot of like services around that, but generally what we'll try to provide education on is more like top of the funnel versus bottom of the funnel. I think when a lot of people are new to digital, they just associate a lead as an opportunity. A lead is somebody that gets on the phone. We're talking about a project, and we would call that more of an opportunity, or even like a sales qualified lead, like somebody that's ready to have that conversation. Whereas we would talk about a raw lead as like somebody joined your newsletter, they subscribed to your blog, they opted in on a download, a kitchen design guide or something like that, and they're just in research mode. So we talk a lot about that being, hey, somebody might hit your site today, be interested in redoing their kitchen, download a guide, and they may not actually want to talk to you for 9 months. So what are we going to do during those 9 months? We're going to put them on an email program where we're going to educate them, send them blog articles, videos, new projects, awards you're winning, like all these things to build trust, to build top of mind awareness, and to educate them, to help them so that when they actually enter the sales process, hopefully they're a better lead and better opportunity for sales because they've already done a lot of research and you've kind of educated them on how you work. So that's generally where we live. We're not sales consultants or like follow-up experts. So if they're using technology to like do text follow-up and all that, that's kind of where we stop our services and we keep it to more of the marketing side.
Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense. I want to ask a question when it comes to staying in touch with that homeowner. As you said, they download the ebook, there's something like that. What happens when a contractor doesn't do those things?
They forget about you. I mean, honestly, like maybe they go back to that ebook, but like we've all downloaded those things. We save them on our desktop and they just sit there forever until you're like, oh, I'm just going to drag all this to the trash. Most of the time they download it, they kind of skim it, they read it. If it's really valuable and it's got something, they'll refer back to it. But honestly, kind of after that point, like if they're researching that week, they kind of explore it, like then that becomes out of sight, out of mind. And so you need new material that you're pushing in front of them. And so, the big risk is that you actually generated a great opportunity. You just didn't think it was a great opportunity because they didn't want to talk to anyone today. I've had plenty of people that have been on our list for 6 years. And then those are the best sales and they're the easiest sales because, gosh, I'm like their best friend. They've been listening to my podcast. They've watched 1 million of my videos. They've read all of our stuff. They come in, they're like, I can't believe we're talking. And you're like, who are you? I've never met you, but they can build that one-sided relationship with your company through the content that you're creating, and you distribute that content through email. So if you write a blog, shoot a video, whatever, you deliver it via email because that's what you captured when they first came in as the researcher. And so I think companies that are really successful see the long game and they see, I'm going to build this big bucket of top of the funnel leads, and I'm not going to push them because I'm never going to force somebody to do a project if they're not ready, but I'm just going to build trust and educate. And because I built a huge top of the funnel, the bottom of the funnel will widen as well. But a lot of people don't stick with it and they're not patient enough. And so I think they get started and they're like, this isn't working. And then they quit, which is a bummer because if you stay the course, then you start to see a lot of the fruits of that.
I want to make a connection here on this. I'm going to hand it back to Dom. That point is so critical. And it's so critical for two parts for any listener to capture. Everything we've said from the moment that a consumer, I'll just say, is inspired on a project, all the way to the point that they're willing to get an estimate. That time could be a day, that time could be 2 years. It certainly could be longer depending on the person, the nature of the project. And I absolutely agree. You have to find a way to stay relevant, add value to the consumer's world in a non-pushy way. If you could do that, you're You're probably one of the few out there that can even do that. And you give yourself an opportunity to be remembered when the project comes around. So absolutely spot on. If you don't do that, you just won't even be considered to even give a bid. So that's just a fact. But there's another important part of that is even those people that say, let me get an estimate and become a lead, be it a lead that we generate for a company, be it a lead that they get on their own, there also still is a nurturing component to that as well. And I know you said you guys don't get into kind of downstream, if you will, but it's the same kind of concept. We've all been there with projects where we just don't know what it costs. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, that's so much more money than I had. We got to go save more pennies. Well, guess what? It takes time to save pennies for some people, right? And that might be 6 months down the road. And it could be for other reasons as well. I remember when we did solar on our house, we just weren't in our house long enough to really have the full, sales presentation. Like, get a year of data, then we'll come back out to your house. I forgot about it, in all honesty. And a company remembered me, and they were one of the people that got a shot because they remembered me a year down the road. So be it permitting issues, financial issues, there are gaps between initial interest and actual purchase. I'd say from the actual click to the actual install. And if all you're doing is trying to hit the homeowner up at the moment they're trying to spend the money, you're probably not going to be seen as a high valuable asset to them. So you do have to pepper in some sort of nurturing. So I think that's a great point, Spencer.
Yeah. And Chris, just to support that with data, I've seen a lot of research. This is like in any given market, typically like 3% are active buyers, meaning like they're ready today. So it just shows you the enormity of opportunity if you can capture people that are ready next week or next month or 6 months or whatever it is.
Yeah, I'm going to say one last thing on that, because as soon as you said that, made me think of another thing. And I remember this too from a contractor a very long time ago. I won't mention their name, but they were in Southern California. And I remember selling a lead to them, and they were very much, and not all of our leads turn into customers today. Big surprise, right? And they're like, look, we want people ready to purchase in the next 30 to 90 days. And I'm like, well, that's great. If I knew exactly who they were, like, great, we'd send them up to you. But keep in mind, like, the lead that's not ready in the next 30 to 90 days, if you hold on to it and nurture it, those 30 to 90 days will eventually come.
Exactly.
And that's what you're looking for, right? So it's like you have to have at least a decent strategy to kind of move people in different corrals within your organization. You can't just be looking people that are ready today with the check foaming from the mouth. That's such a small percentage of people.
Yeah, Chris, you're not only a knowledge thief, but a point thief, because I was going to say all those things. But what I will say, just to reinforce all of that, not to beat a dead horse by any means, but in my career, the most pervasive thing that I've seen come across time and time again is the idea that a lead is not good unless the homeowner is going to call me back after the first dial I made to them, right? That's just not a good lead. They don't have an intent to buy. Man, life is not that easy. And if it was that easy, we would be running a really, really huge business.
Yeah, you'd be charging a lot more for those leads.
We sure would, But the thing is that not everybody is at the same place in what I call the buying spectrum, right? When you go into Best Buy, if you're just maybe for the first time, you're just seeing that TV that you want to look at and get some information on, right? Like, that doesn't mean that you're not going to come back to Best Buy, right? Like, when you're ready to go, you're ready to go. And if that salesperson doesn't come up and talk to you and really try to flush those things out, it's going to probably take you longer to get there, right? So that's why people, have salespeople still at Best Buy, right? That's why Amazon continues to nurture you and give you coupons after they've seen, they put some cookies on your machine there, and they see that you've been back to that same thing every time, and then they do a little price drop, right? I test them out on incognito mode. I get the good deals.
Well, Dom, just to build on that Best Buy example, it flashed me back to a moment. I think it was about 10 years ago. I was like just out of college, had my own place. And of course, my first big purchase on a Black Friday was going to be a TV, not a couch. I'll just sit on the floor. Like, I need a big TV. So I went and I talked
for you.
What's that?
I said, that's a true man cave right there.
Yeah, exactly. I think I was sitting on an ottoman, but I didn't care. So I go and talk to the sales guy, and we walked through some options. I knew the TV that I wanted, but I was like, I just need to think about it. I literally went to the other side of the store for 20 minutes, and then I went back because that's just my buying profile. And I feel like that's a very short example of you could talk to me and that guy was like, oh, that guy was a terrible lead. It's like, no, I just wasn't quite ready. And in that case, it was 20 minutes, but it could be 2 weeks or 2 months for other people, just depending on their scenario.
Exactly. And I used to work in direct sales. Surprise, surprise. And I used to dial outbound to contractors, to lawyers, to doctors. It's so all different types of direct marketing. And it was pretty incredible. So we had a CRM that you'd get every morning. You get a new batch of leads to call on for that day. Some leads you'd be nurturing for a while, but it'd be crazy to see. I see a lead that I eventually end up selling, weeks later. They're going through the process, and how many dials that other salespeople that interacted with that lead got on. And not only how many dials, but all the notes are like, bad lead, guy will never buy, so on and so forth. Everything that you could possibly think of. But to me, it's like, is the guy alive? Does he have a business? Does he have a credit card? If he has those three things, then it's a good lead to me, right? It's just a matter of time before I get to that person, right? And obviously that's a very, more of an extreme example, but that's the thing that I think about when I think about leads and nurturing, right?
Yeah, low expectations. Look, I'll make it clear for everybody. Like, it's, companies ask all the time, well, what does it take? Like, what's the tech stack? What's the process? What are the positions? And like, guys, I can kid you not. And Dom's traveled the country to see all of our clients. I won't pretend we work with every prestigious brand out there, but we work with a lot of them. There are companies out there that have the most beautiful office, all the tech. I mean, video conferencing systems that are more expensive than cars. And they suck at working leads, literally suck at it. And then there's companies out there on plyboard desks with rotary phones, like in the snow, and crush it. And, of all the years, like everybody always asks, like, what is it? And it's like, there's a lot of questions I would want to know if somebody can make it work. But I'll say the same thing I've said for years. It's the way that people think about it. You know what I mean? If they think that it will work, it will work. I think that's the beauty of most marketing in a lot of ways, right? We all know people that crush it on Facebook and door-to-door marketing and events and Home Advisor and Modernize and every other thing out there, right? And so those people that are crushing it, they believe it's going to continue to work. And what do? They don't look at obstacles as insurmountable challenges. It's just like, shit, dude, the algorithm changed or this changed or that changed. Let's just adapt. And so I think the big thing is just be scrappy. Like, scrappy goes a long way in this industry. I'm curious from your perspective, Spencer. I mean, like, with all the things that you guys are doing, like, what is the blueprint of the companies that come to you that end up being successful? Like, what does that look like from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, in a couple of words, they stay committed. And I think it builds on really what you said. It's like, hey, I believe in this methodology and this framework, which is, I believe by educating, by creating content, by being transparent, that I will draw in more people to me. And when they get to me, they'll actually get to know and like us because they'll get to do all their own research. Had a couple of scenarios in the last year or so that come to mind where I, talk to a client and they're like 9 months in, we do 12-month contracts. And they're like, when are we going to see the results? And you kind of like talk them off the ledge and you show them the progress and everything. And they hit that like 12, 14 month mark. They're into year 2. And then they come and they're like, thanks for talking me off the ledge. Like, I see it all working now. And another experience I had was like, we run a podcast and we started a few years back. And what I told the team was, and this was a little bit further into my marketing journey, so I had enough perspective, but I just said, we're going to do this for a year before we even decide if we want to keep doing it or not. Because I just knew if we decided like, hey, let's do this for 3 months and then we'll gauge if we want to keep doing a podcast, like we would have quit. We would have quit at 6 months. We would have quit. But at 12 months, we looked at the data and we're like, yeah, we can see a lot of progress and this is building momentum. And now it's a huge channel, for us. And so I would just say they stay committed. And then they also do, you look at the data and you adjust and you change, like Google's changing all the time, Facebook, Instagram, like Instagram didn't exist when I first started. You just have to look up and keep your eyes out there. And I think one of the things that we're seeing coming down the pipe is like, people better get on board with video. Like it's, the companies that are doing it now are really seeing great results from just integrating it, not just going, oh, we need a video for our homepage, but like integrating it everywhere into your marketing material, into your emails, into your sales follow-up, whether it's personal one-to-one video or like, hey, this is going out to our whole, nurturing list, things like that. And so I think you've got to have your eyes up and be open to changing and not just saying, hey, this is the system, let's just keep doing it forever and ever. So stay committed and then changing with the times, I think.
Those are a couple great points. I go back to some of the best leaders just have that vision. They know to stay the course. There's going to be challenges, but I always go back to we call the nurture process the baking period. The reason why we call it the baking period because it's a good analogy to how you have to really understand some of these marketing tactics. And when you're making your investment, like on the stock market, right? It's going to take time for that to index and see the actual fruits of that, right? It's the same thing when you cook a turkey. If I threw a turkey in the oven, and I took it out 5 minutes later and expected to have some good Thanksgiving dinner, I'm going to have a bad time. It's the same thing with marketing, man. You got to let it bake a little bit. But how would you know that, right? You would know because you've read the back of the package of the turkey, right? You've watched some YouTube videos, you've talked to your great aunt that's an amazing cook, So you gotta go to some of those authority figures in your industry and you gotta be inquisitive. I think and overall you've got to develop some type of relationship with someone that you can trust that has domain authority that can bring you along to that stuff. You got to, to Chris's point, man, you got to steal some knowledge and not be afraid to steal that knowledge. But a lot of the challenges that I see is just people not willing to be that inquisitive. They're going to just say, hey, I got money to spend. Like, let me just put some money at it. And it doesn't work a month later. And then, well, this was a bad source. Right.
Yeah. I love that analogy. The one I've heard is like, you're baking a cake and you're like, I need this to go faster. So you turn it up to like 800 and it's like, you can't just cut the time in half because you turned up the heat, so there is some element of time there.
It's a really important one, guys. Like the recipe, right? I mean, that's what you guys are describing as a recipe. Like the recipe is the recipe. It's probably different ways to bake alternative cakes, but like you guys know how to bake your cake. Dom, I'm gonna have to switch that turkey one out for the Chinese bamboo tree. I like that one a little bit better.
Kind of hungry now, Chris. So if
I know, right?
It's almost lunch.
but the point is like I think anybody that's looking to get into any sort of program, and certainly we're talking about marketing here, and Spencer's company is just understand the financial investment. There's an expectation component to it as well. Understand the work that needs to be put in. I mean, we can switch out any analogy, right? Exercising, weight loss, transforming your company, hiring, like there's a recipe. Like just understand, like the best companies that I know that we work with are the ones that when they came aboard, they didn't just say, hey, what do I have to spend or what kind of results did I get? But they also asked the question, what exactly do I need to do to be as successful as the other clients? Like, let's not reinvent the wheel. Like, reinvent it once you've like done what the other guys have done and you've stolen all their secrets. But if you're just getting into this industry, don't be a maverick. Like, just copy the shit out of other people. There's plenty of good modeling out there to do. And then like, once you guys get your feet underneath you and you start to see that, then like start to be a little bit more unique or novel in the way you go about it. But if this is your first time out the bat, like you got to trust the expertise of the people. And if they say, look, the cake takes 12 months to bake and this is the sequence, really what you're asking yourself is, are you willing to put yourself through that process? Don't think of the money. The money is the easy part. I tell everybody signing contracts and spending money, God, I wish it was that easy. Like as hard as you may think that actually is, it's not the hard part. Corralling resources, looking at obstacles and thinking about how the hell are we going to overcome this? Like those are the real challenges. And so look at that recipe and just ask yourself, am I willing to do the things necessary that Spencer's seen over whatever amount of years he's been doing this that have been successful? If the answer is yes, you should sign up. If the answer is no, then you're just not ready.
I love it. It's great advice.
Yeah, I can't agree more. It's funny because I was talking to a salesperson yesterday. He was asking me advice as she's working with this $1 million company that wants to grow to $3 million next year. And she gets on the phone call with them and she says, hey, I want to learn a little bit more about your business. I want to try to make sure the product is right for you and try to understand how we're going to place you and all that stuff. It's like, no, I want to learn about your business. I got money to spend. I want to see, how many leads you can give me. And at that point, she was like, I knew there was a huge red flag there because, first of all, not everybody is equipped to work a specific product the same way. And a lot has to do with the mentality that you go about, working a digital lead source and how you're going to view that relationship, right? You're looking to sign a 30-day contract and see the ROI, the max ROI. That's not going to ever, it's going to be 99% of the time a failure, And what I often find is that companies that start to limit their scale, they plateau, they've gone in with the mentality, and you kind of touched on this before, Spencer, like they go into the mentality like, hey, I've done all this and I've built myself now a $3-5 million business. How do I get to the next level? And all they want to do is spend money at it. But that's only the beginning of the process, right?
Yeah, I think that's really sound advice, because we just want to be able to write the check and be like, great, solved, but there's always the work component or the effort. And I was thinking about what Chris had said earlier, just the companies that are going to make it work are going to make it work. And I think you make it work because you go, okay, it's not working. So what am I doing wrong? Versus just like, oh, it's not working, I quit, and I think that's the mentality.
That's the challenge for the marketing company since the inception of marketing, I think. It's just convincing folks, and I don't want this to sound like an infomercial, but yeah, if marketing was really easy and there was just one golden lead source that you could just turn the faucet on and it would work all the time, I mean, man, I would be all over that, and I would be in that business,
Yeah, absolutely.
It doesn't really exist.
Let me know when you find it, Dom.
I want to find Atlantis first,
Yeah.
But we're running up on time here, Spencer. I've really enjoyed the conversation, man. I gotta say, there's a lot of good stuff out there. There's a lot of different actors in this space, and you seem like a good egg. And I'm hoping that more folks, can interact with your company as well. So I just kind of want to, as we kind of end here, the last question I have for you is, where can viewers find you, and what can we expect from Builder Funnel, over the next year?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I've really enjoyed the conversation as well. And I would say like a couple of easy ways to just like get to know us a little bit. One, you can go pick up the book, wrote it and launched it earlier this year. It's Remodeler Marketing Blueprint, just Amazon. It's the easiest way. And then we have an academy that you can sign up for that teaches all this stuff. And we have a 2-week trial, builderfunnelacademy.com. But yeah, for us, what we're really trying to do is just, do more education around like what it takes to be successful. And so like, that's why we launched the Academy last year. We launched it right when kind of COVID hit. I think we launched it like 30 days after that, and just trying to get push the education down to people that maybe can't hire an agency or a full-time marketer. It's like, wrote the book. How do you do this? If you just want to do it yourself and learn, because we bumped into a lot of just shady SEO companies, and people have bad experiences, and we're just trying to shed light on what we do know and what we don't know, because Google tells us some things and they don't tell us other things. And it's like, we're not trying to say that we know everything, because we already know we don't. And so I think for us, it's just going to be more outreach in that direction. Like, we're big on education. One of our core values is always be teaching. And we just try to live that. So I would just recommend check out the podcast, check out our YouTube, buy the book, like just take a step towards learning. And then if you want to reach out and work with us, like, you will. And if you don't, like, hopefully you're better off having learned something and go on your way.
Well, awesome. I thanks so much again. Best of luck to you. Hopefully we swing back around here post-COVID. Would love to have you in the office, a new studio we're building out there.
That'd be cool. Yeah.
Have you down to Austin. It's a good spot.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you guys having me on today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for all our listeners out there. If you're listening and watching, thanks for listening to Built Better. Before we go, show some love to your favorite podcasts by leaving us a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and we'll see you next time.